Hello, everybody. This is the CT Sports Talent Show. My name is Christopher Saunders, and I'm pleased to have on from the In the Huddle, the D3, not Twitter, but it's called X now. He's the co-host and kind of in a lot of ways has really helped promote Division III football. James Baker is with me. Mr. Baker, I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, happy to always fun to talk D3 football or maybe even some Connecticut high school football. It's been a few decades since I played in Connecticut, but yeah.
Division III football in Connecticut, because I know each state could say that they love their football.
Mhm.
I can only speak for Connecticut, and I know how much the high school level, which starts in just a few weeks. I know the radio, our first game is September 7th. We're going to have
Okay.
Woodland and Holy Cross. That's going to be an epic game. I won't
Yeah.
give you with all the
Yeah.
details on that. But as far as the college ranks are concerned, you mentioned the NESCAC when you and I were talking. You got Trinity.
hmm
You've got Wesleyan, right? When you think about
hmm
likes of Central, you've got Southern, you've got UNH. I mean, there's a lot of colleges kind of getting ready for
Yep.
the upcoming season. But before we get into that, I just want to ask about the how the podcast came about. If you could talk to me about that, because I'm very intrigued by that.
Well, I mean, originally it was basically a little bit of a spin-off of the Around the Nation podcast from D3Football.com. My co-host and partner Frank Rossi and a friend of his, Eric Wren, who was an All-American tackle from RPI, started basically what was an internet radio show, a live show. And I called in on the first episode. I went to Hobart College, and so basically Union, Hobart, and RPI. Frank's a Union grad. We focused on the Liberty League, and we just would sort of talk about the scores and the players and plays that kind of happened each weekend. And over time, Eric stepped back, and I took a more full time role. I was sort of kind of helped out with production in season two, and then I think I was officially a co-host or whatever you want. And we had like the three of us for a season, and then Eric stepped back to pursue some other things, and Frank and I just kind of ran with it. We enjoyed getting to meet all the different players and programs and coaches in the league. But after a while, we realized that we were kind of missing out on a broader opportunity. So we started expanding into the rest of the East region. And then over the last, 6 years, when we went to video, we started covering, kind of a larger swath. And really through the COVID years, we kind of became more of a national program because we were covering spring football. We were very pro spring football, even though there was kind of the remnants of COVID and there was some controversy. We really rubbed some people the wrong way on our opinions of what could or should have happened in the 2020 fall season that was ultimately canceled. But at the end of the day, we advocated for spring football. It happened in many places around the country, and so it felt good to kind of be right. It went down without incident, and now here we are, a couple of seasons removed, but we have all these, COVID, fifth year eligible players on some of these rosters that it has really affected the division kind of across the board, and I think we saw that in the last couple of years, and this is one of the last years we'll see that too. I mean, when D3 football released their preseason All America team, I think like 77 guys that were ones that had come back for one more year or something like that. It was a huge number. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out this year.
Throughout the last couple of years, coach, since they began playing football again after the COVID season, and obviously when things were canceled, when you were kind of following, right, when you were kind of going through with the podcast, I know you follow Division III football, but with a very fine comb, right, with a very big
hmm
microphone,
We try.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you do a great job at that.
Nice.
Have you noticed that the game has changed at all because of the extra year players being able to have that time to come back?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you think about the fact that a fifth year college player is probably 22, almost 23 years old, that's a big difference from a 17, 18-year-old kid who's just getting dropped off at college, like what happened with with mine today. So there is both a physical, a mental, and and for a lot of these teams, just having all those reps, having that kind of extra year and spring practices that have become more common now. The level. I mean, I know everyone sort of maybe knocks, is D3 glorified high school football. No, if you watch a D3 game with some talented teams, I mean, all these guys are the best athletes from their hometowns. They were either all state or all conference. And maybe instead, they didn't go D1 because instead of being 6'2", they're 5'10", or instead of being 260, they're 230 or something like that. But they're still amazing athletes, and they really play for the love of the game. A D3 atmosphere is really more of a family, tight knit. There's a lot of school spirit, of course, but it's just a different vibe than when you go to like some big time FBS, which is really more of an entertainment spectacle, in my opinion. It's not the same kind of experience that you'd get at a small college game.
Well, I know when I've called games, because I've not been able to call a Trinity or a Wesleyan football game, but I have called games around like soccer games, for example, when the football team is
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
you can hear it. And I sometimes get like not annoyed, but it's almost like I get like my focus goes to the to the other game because I hear the emotion and I hear the crowd through my mic. So I can only imagine the opposing players and obviously the soccer team of either Wesleyan or Trinity because you can really hear it. So, I
Yeah.
think it's a great point, James, when you brought up the fact of how the Division 3 atmosphere. I mean, whenever I'm driving and I know I'm going to do a game on a Saturday, I always see if it's the home team of Trinity or Wesleyan. I know there's three things. I'm going to smell food. There's going to be tents, and there's going to be a lot of games being played like cornhole and all the other
Yep.
great ones that are played right before a football game.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget our friends in Danbury, WestCon. I think they're the Wolves now. They've changed their mascot, but they built up a strong program, and they used to be in the New Jersey Athletic Conference, which was kind of interesting,
Mhm.
given their proximity to New York. But it's funny. I was talking with Coach Verrera over at Bridgewater State today, and all the team, that sort of traditional, New England. Massachusetts State, conference that they're all in are really geared up for this fall. They're excited, and yeah, not just in Connecticut, but all over New England.
James, I want to ask you about a Connecticut guy who played at Holy Cross back in the day. Coach Mulrooney, Dan Mulrooney, who was a
Yeah.
fantastic coach, obviously, at Anna Maria. Had a
Hmm.
successful season. It was a struggle in the beginning. He was reshaping the program, building a culture, and he
Yep.
was able to do great things the last 2 years, especially winning the conference title as well. And I know he's at Lock Haven now in Division
Yeah.
Two. But when you guys were following them, I mean, were you like when they popped, were you guys surprised that they popped so quick, or was it expected because of how successful he was with that?
Well, I mean, and I wouldn't say he popped so quick. I mean, he took a lot of, 0 and 1, win season. It took him a couple of years. I mean, I gave, Anna Maria credit for number one, giving a guy, as young as him the opportunity, and the fact that he hung in there and they kept supporting him, through those tough seasons where they were only winning one or no games. And yeah, when they finally put it all together, I mean, Dan's a friend and great guy. I've seen him when he's come down to recruit in Florida, where I live, and he just has one of those, just a very charismatic, outgoing personality. He kind of lights up the room, so you could see why young men would be interested in playing for someone who's got a high level of energy, always very positive. And so, yeah, it might take another couple of years, but you know, Lock Haven's one of these programs out in Pennsylvania that has had a lot of losing seasons for a long, long time. And I think if Dan was able to pull it off at Anna Maria, he can do the same thing at Lock Haven if they give him the resources and help him recruit the players that they need. He's going to get it done.
Are there any players from the Connecticut area that you guys have either covered, talked to, spoken with, witnessed as far as watching the games? And I'm sure there's many Connecticut guys, but is there anyone in particular that really jumped out to you where when you watch the film or watch the player play, it kind of like to steal the Skip Bayless term, really jumped off my TV screen? Does that make sense?
Yeah, gosh, it's over 15 or something years. There's been a few. It's hard to remember
Hmm.
everybody's name. I know that there was a running back from WestCon who ended up going into the pros. I think he actually played in the USFL this last season, and I'm kind of blanking on his name. But there have been a few guys where you could tell that they were, they had either the right sort of body type or speed, or they had some kind of um, characteristic or intangibles, whatever you want to call it, that made them stand out. It's funny actually. Even though he's not a Connecticut guy, a kid from my hometown well, where I live now in Florida, is actually the quarterback for Trinity in Hartford. He went to Trinity Prep, where a couple of my kids went to school for prep school. His name is Spencer Fetter. He's now the senior quarterback for Trinity College and helped lead them to an undefeated NESCAC season. Which so we obviously noted that because he's a kid from my town, but other Connecticut specific guys, I'd have to think about it a little bit. But yeah, I'm sure there's plenty out there.
Well, if you think of any names, make sure you send them my way because
I
obviously
will. I will. You
I
caught
don't
me.
know.
Yeah, I should have done my homework a little better before. I should know what I was looking into here.
Because I don't know every Connecticut player that's played in college. I know a lot of the high school guys over the last 5 years, 7 years, because that's how long I've been with the radio station. But as far
Yeah.
as the college ranks, there's been obviously so many that have been successful
Yeah.
from Division 3 to Division 1. You mentioned the Trinity side, and I want to go back to them because obviously I've seen their program a lot because I've done a lot more games at Trinity than I have at
Hmm.
Wesleyan for various sports. The way that those kids, young men, I should say, structurally prepare themselves for a game. And I can't base it off of Wesleyan because where I've done games, it's hard to see because they play kind of like on the baseball field at Wesleyan, where at Trinity they
Yeah.
have their own stadium and the whole nine. But you're right. The way that they are not just built, I mean, I think there's been a couple times where a Trinity player, either when he's been done playing, if he's had an extra year, or even if he's had a couple years, they've left Trinity to move up to Division 1, Division 2. So I think kind
Hmm.
of the old adage of people, maybe this was years ago, where they thought, oh, if you play Division 3, you have no shot to move up or whatever. I think
Yeah.
that's completely false.
Yeah, and we've seen that. I mean, there was I think Lutz from Tufts is now over at Delaware. There've been a few, guys that have made the jump. There was a young man that we had spoken with who's from Oregon, who played, I believe, for Linfield or Willamette, who's now at Oregon State. So, I mean, there's always at least a handful of guys every year who, and now especially with the extra year of eligibility with COVID, maybe that'll change, in the next couple of seasons as that goes away. But it's given some players an opportunity to jump in and do that next step.
For someone who's seen as much football as you have, and I'm stealing a question from Peter King because he asked
Yeah.
if he asked the NFL guys, the people that he talks to, what's the biggest thing that concerns you? What is something that you worry about as far as the game of football or college or pros, whatever? So I'm going to ask you, James, what is the one thing either with football or maybe with Division 3 in general? What is the concerning part for you?
Well, at this point, and I think the good news is that there will be a change made eventually, but I think playoff access for Division 3 football is becoming a challenge now that there's 28 conferences that receive an automatic bid. There's only room for four teams to get in through what's referred to as a Pool C, which is really just a fancy way of saying an at-large. And so there's a lot of teams in these 28 conferences that have very strong runners up that are probably they should be playoff eligible, but they won't get a chance. Now, I know there has been some talks going on at the NCAA where they could expand the playoffs to 40 teams, and effectively, give sort of like a top,
Hmm.
4, 8, first round buys. It would provide, you know, um, an opportunity to have more of the bowl games like the New England Bowl that Bridgewater won last year. A little more of a spotlight versus being, kind of being pushed down the ladder by all the 16 first round D3 NCAA playoff games. So I think access would be important, and now that we're at like a 240, getting into the 250 range with teams, having only 32 qualify is
Mm.
probably not enough, and so I'm hoping that in the future we see that change, and we'll see more teams get the opportunity to compete for a national championship.
Is there any possibility that because of what's been going on at the Division One level with now the expanded playoffs, and now potentially you'll be seeing, not just potentially, you will be seeing 12 teams, and then I've heard rumors how that could even move up even more to 14, 16. I mean, the numbers just getting crazy. But with that being
Hmm.
said, with that now becoming a factor, do you think that could be one reason why Division Three is kind of thinking about and maybe potentially expanding their playoffs a little bit?
Um, I mean, at the end of the day, Division Three only receives like I think 3 or 4% of the revenues that are generated at the FBS, level, typically from events like and even not even FBS, but like the NCAA Division One, like the March Madness tournament, and so, um, it's a different sort of pay scale and structure. I think for the Division Three playoffs, it's really more around access and making sure that um, more teams have a chance to get in and compete versus limiting it to just the automatic qualifier conferences. But with the money in Division One has gotten so kind of crazy and outlandish. And this whole name, image, and likeness, the NIL deals. I mean, there have been a few D3 guys like I think Jack Betts at Amherst who has made a name for himself and gotten a number of those NIL sponsorships. But for the most part, Division Three, it's not the same kind of business model. It's really more of a pure version of the sport, and so that's I don't necessarily see it impacting it too much, but it's hard, I'm sure, for these Division Three coaches and athletes to look and be like to see another team in their state or other getting some ridiculous donations or money getting thrown at their players and all that. It's just a different ball game altogether.
Is there any chance that, and I know there are certain players in Division Three that have been able to benefit from the NIL, which is name, image, and likeness that you mentioned. But as the game kind of continues to grow with that aspect, and we see, at some point maybe some regulations with that and some controllability, policing almost with NIL. Do you think
Mhm.
there's a chance that maybe Division Three can, obviously they're not going to get 100% of what Division One is getting, even Division Two to a certain degree. But do you think they get a little bit more of the pie than what they're getting right now with NIL?
I mean, I think it's going to depend on the programs and the athletes. I mean, college football in general is pretty regionalized, and so and a lot of Division Three schools, for the most part, tend to be in more rural locations. They're not there aren't a ton that are in bigger cities, so that'll kind of come down to the student athletes sort of being opportunistic and looking for places that could potentially provide that type of sponsorship and or programs that can work with local entrepreneurs to try to expand their brands and presence. That's sort of a win-win. It's a little more complicated given sort of the more rural, smaller town feel that D3 football has, but it's not impossible.
James, I want to switch gears over to the high school ranks just for a couple minutes while I still
Yeah,
have you, and I appreciate you coming on. I'd love to get
sure.
your thoughts on the six classes that the CIAC now has in terms of the playoffs. They started last year. They originally had four for a while. Now it's six. So it's S, double
Hmm.
S, M, double M, L, double L. So
Okay.
what are your thoughts with the six classes, if you have any?
Well, I mean, I know in general, Connecticut has grown. I mean, my hometown of Avon, Connecticut, when I was in high school, we were a Class S school. We had maybe 500 students total in enrolled, and um, I was lucky to be part of a Class S state championship track team. Our football team, we were more like a 500 squad. We had a good run in my sophomore year where we almost made the playoffs. I think we would have played Ansonia, but it was one of those deals where we just missed it by a couple of long plays. But I think in any case, having more opportunities to compete for championships is great. I think the fact that the state has grown and towns like Avon are now like L and There will always be, some of the bigger schools out there that have been double L for a long time. But I think as the population evolves, like, so my dad grew up in Canton, and like they didn't even have football back in the day, and now they have, every sport you can imagine, lacrosse. Like the population has grown where they can support more of those things, but they're still more of like an S or an M size institution. So I think it makes sense to keep those classifications and to try to make it as fair as possible based on enrollment. When I was a player back then, we did play up some M and some L teams, and when we did, it usually didn't go so well for us. There was a reason why we were in S. We just didn't have the roster, and we didn't have the same size and depth of kids, and that's kind of the same thing you see at the college level. It's the programs that have the size and the depth that really, do the best.
One more question, James, and again, I appreciate you coming on. I know
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
talks that I've had with various high school coaches and such, I know one big thing is kind of like what you just shared, which is you're an S school playing the monsters, the L's, the double L's, and a lot of times it ends up being a very one-sided affair. Now, there are certain sports where this like Ansonia, right? Ansonia has shown
Yeah.
that they can beat some pretty power teams, albeit the NVL has not played outside the NVL since 2014 when Ansonia played
Hmm.
Newtown. Newtown won that, and that's the last time an NVL team has played outside the NVL. I digress.
Okay.
Maybe one day that changes. But the question I have for
Yeah.
you is, do you think there is potential down the road to see teams that are, let's say, Class S, if they stay with this model, they stick to Class S and double S, same thing for the M schools and the L schools and such. Do you think that's a possibility sometime in the future or not?
Yeah, I think so, but it always kind of boils down to the athletic directors and coaches, because there are certain individuals that will always, view as they just wanted to try to see, what it's like, or to test, their program. Like, what, we may be really great at this level. Let's, go up a couple of weight classes and punch above our, our weight class, and see what happens. I mean, we had an opportunity my senior year of high school to play Simsbury, which was a Class L school, much bigger than us. And, the way the calendar fell, it gave us an extra game. It didn't go well for my team, but at the end of the day, I got to play one extra football game that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten a chance to play. I knew a lot of the guys on that other team. We would, run into each other at the McDonald's on Route 44 on the weekends, and at parties and stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun. And I think that's what being a kid is about, is trying to, um, have those opportunities to compete and to, be there with your teammates and your buddies and just see how it goes. I mean, there'll always be coaches and administrators who are going to want to try to go up a time or two and see what happens, and whether the state regulates against that. I don't know how the CIAC is gonna manage that, but at the end of the day, if the calendar falls into a way where those kind of opportunities present themselves, then why not? Let's let the kids play.
James, awesome conversation talking about some Division III football and the high school level as well here in
Yeah,
Connecticut. Best of luck this season, people. Make sure that you
thanks.
follow the In the Huddle Division III podcast, also their Twitter/X handle. I got to figure out how to
Yeah.
combine those into one. Exactly. May have to put the X like Des Bryant, the Des Bryant
Yeah,
X. But hey, it's been awesome to be able to talk with you. I'd love to get you back on, maybe even your partner
absolutely.
at some point as well, to be able to discuss
Yeah,
the Division III football season as it continues this year.
absolutely. And next time I'll rattle off a list of some Connecticut guys for you. I'll be more prepared.
Hey, you did just fine. That wrap things up here in the CT Sports Talent Show. So until next time, stay safe. Remember, CT stands for Connecticut Talent. I'm Majori Find Them All. Go there, should everybody, and be well.